Have you ever heard of a relationship that ended mainly because they had different political views? What happened? You don't have to agree on every single issue, but you have to share a similar worldview and set of values. I assume there are couples who can be together regardless, but I can't imagine my significant other would see the world in a completely different light than me. Yeah, I heard it through the wall. My neighbor was arguing with her husband about politics. I ended up walking out the door and saw her husband running out of the flat with a fork in his shoulder. He ran out of the entryway and was never seen again. Politics and religion are two things that I make sure we're in agreement on before even the first date. Saves everybody a lot of time and strife down the line. My mother's friend was always a vocal feminist, and her husband was always quietly conservative until his partner had to have an abortion for medical reasons. He brought her home the day after the procedure, and he left to go to the shops, and never came back, and left her a letter saying how he couldn't be with a murderer, and he hopes she lives a long painful life, and that she burns in hell for what she did to his child. He tried to reconcile after he finally let someone explain to him what a medical abortion was, and I believe she told him to fuck off and die. Slightly different than the other ones here, but a friend of mine's parents divorced partially because of her dad cheating on her mom, but partially because of political differences. They were actually both conservative, just different kinds of conservative. He was an atheistic libertarian who wouldn't hire black people for his business because the statistics show they are more prone to crime, while she was a deeply religious evangelical Christian who thought fantasy was satanic and evolution was made up by scientists trying to undermine God. Even though they had overlapping political beliefs, like they'd likely vote for the same person in a given election, he thought everything he believed was grounded in reality and facts and logic, and she believed hers were by divine mandate. I'm a leftist, but I could see a similar thing happening with, say, a tanky and an Antifa leftist. Even though your beliefs allegedly align, they are coming from different values. Only about 4 of marriages are between a Democrat and a Republican, so most of these stories are about finding out you disagree with a partner, not living with a partner you've disagreed with. https://ifstudies.org. Blood marriages between Democrats and Republicans are extremely rare. Do family relationships count? Pretty much my entire family. I wouldn't say broke up really because it was only a few dates, but I definitely ended things with a guy who revealed his white supremacist and fascist leanings. Like actually talked about the great ideas of the Nazi regime, and how we should basically have a white supremacist Christian theocracy in a country. To add icing on that cake, I'm mixed race. Also not religious. He knew those things. I'm obviously not white, plus he met my dad in passing, who was even more obviously not white. Religion had briefly come up on the second date. Third date he had a few drinks and goes full on Nazi-loving, misogynistic, theocratic rant. Yay Mao. I saw a relationship like that from the inside. She thought everyone should be forced to be Christian. I thought otherwise. A friend of mine dated this girl for a couple months and she seemed pretty cool. One day she wore a MAGA hat to a party. We all thought it was an ironic joke. This was before Trump got elected, and a lot of people didn't take him seriously as a candidate, plus we are Canadian. When people talked to her about it, it became very clear that she was dead serious. The next day my friend and her had a serious talk about politics. He's not an ultra-leftist by any means, and in some ways he is right-leaning. The final straw was when it came out that she had a fake Facebook profile that she used to harass Muslims. He broke it off and she was shocked. I have seen them end, and like every other story, it was just mainly too many arguments that lead to the breakups. What I do see, that I find kind of sad, but also interesting, is many of my peers have Republican husbands and very liberal wives. The husbands just pretend to be liberal in front of their wives, but when it's just the boys out at the bars, their conservative sides come out strong. These dudes just pretend, and when voting comes around they vote red. My wife and I have bets on how long these relationships will last. Seems kind of callous of us, and we do find it sad, but it's also mad interesting to pay attention to. November 2008. Hanging out at the house, and Barack Obama has just won the election. Just as I'm about to start celebrating, my girlfriend starts crying. I mean bawling inconsolably. Trying to figure out if she had just gotten some bad news on her BlackBerry or something like that. She is actually crying at the TV. She was crying because she felt her country had just been ruined. I am a black dude. It was the first time that politics had ever played any part in my dating life. Needless to say, I was quite shocked. That was the year I learned that a hot body wasn't everything, and in fact it wasn't even enough. Needless to say, we drifted off after that. I was in the talking phase with someone when I made a comment about how I didn't care about the royal wedding between Will and Kate. She ghosted me after that and was supposedly horrified at my opinion. Would have been incompatible, and I'd now very happily married. Knew a couple who broke up recently because the BF took off the mask and went full right-wing. I'm not even talking about the Republican for the economics reasons. Oh no, apparently, and through some of the text-threatening voicemails he had sent recently, he was fully into forced marriages, women not being the breadwinners being glorified baby makers, pro-life with zero exceptions, anti-immigration, anti-Semitic except for Israel for some reason. And of course, he did spew a few QAnon-related conspiracies about how Kamala wants to drink baby blood. They were dating for almost 2 years before he revealed himself. Edit, lots of triggered Republicans keep DMing messaging chat requests telling me that he doesn't represent their views and is an outlier. Keep crying babies. These are the people you let into your club and actively catered to, and now you gotta deal with it. A lot of these are left vs right politics, so I'll share mine which was within party, but definitely just a worldview issue. M left. But what would probably be far left on some specific issues, but moderate left overall. She was pretty far left overall. But very into identity politics, specifically having been raised by a first-gen immigrant family. We didn't really fundamentally disagree on much, but the degree to which our lives revolved around politics was the deal breaker. For me, it came down to every discussion devolving into politics and there being absolutely no option to disagree or even change the topic. BC to her, the politics and her idea of herself were the same thing, her own words. We could be talking about the new burrito place, and it would end up in a lecture about systemic oppression of people of color. It just isn't enjoyable to be unable to talk about anything else or relax a bit. More religious than political. She was a Buddhist and believed all was transient and temporary. She used this as an excuse to avoid putting in any effort past the honeymoon period and wouldn't commit to an adult relationship where both parties plan for the future. This manifested itself as a political difference as well as a religious one. But really, she was a free love hippie who hadn't grown up enough to cultivate genuine communication skills. Left. European left. Dated a guy for a few months in NYC while I was there for an internship. We were crossing the street while ahead of us there were two guys holding hands. He looked at them, turned to me with a horrified look on his face, and said, "That's disgusting. It's not my job to baby or educate someone into becoming a decent human being." I pulled my hand away from him, told him I absolutely do not tolerate bigotry or homophobia, and walked away. My biggest concern, even now, is that those guys' feelings may have been hurt if they heard. I'm very, very sorry for what happened, and I wish I had run after them to tell them that. My very first internet friend and I stopped being friends because he became a hard right conservative, and I was a leftist lesbian. There's no such thing as disagreeing when it comes to human rights, so there was no friendship to be had anymore. I've been lucky enough to have a partner that I share the big ideas with. I absolutely feel for those on the canon casualties subreddit that have had their previously good-natured reasonable partner fall down a rabbit hole that has changed their whole political and overall personality. She voted for Brexit, I didn't. We didn't last.